everyone. I'm hoping this is on live properly, and I just wanted to welcome you all. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Good morning from Brisbane, Australia, and good afternoon or good evening to you if you're in North America or wherever you are in your time zone. This is my very first live show called Globalise Yourself, and hoping this session will raise awareness about global skills and mindset, and also help you or your organization give some tips on how to communicate and work with people from different cultural backgrounds. So let me just introduce a little bit of myself. Let me just change this. My name is Rie Eichmann. I am originally from Tokyo, Japan, and I have studied and lived in many different countries, including Japan, Taiwan, Thailand, US, UK, and Australia. I came to Australia 4 years ago after I lived in London, UK for 12 years. So I've been helping individuals or professionals understanding, communicating effectively with different cultural backgrounds, like offering intercultural training, and passionate about, helping individuals and professionals to understand the cultural difference. I used to deliver cultural specific training, and I'm passionate about this topic. So hence, Globalize Yourself. And today, we have this topic that we would like to cover. So this session will be 30 minutes. And after this intro, we have special guest John will be joining us very shortly. And we will talk about his challenges that he had working internationally, and also what kind of skills you need. And John will be sharing top tip. So please stay tuned. If you're watching this on live or on archives, let us know where you're accessing. Comment us where you're from, or any expectations or question. Thank you. Good morning. Manabe-san, thank you for coming. And as I said, this is our first session, so I'm very nervous, but very excited to be here today. And so if you're on LinkedIn, I'm sure you have seen so many inspirational topic and posts from John. So John is a business English coach based in Toronto, Canada, and let's welcome. Hi, John.
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks. Good morning to you. And
good morning and good evening to you.
Thank you.
In Canada. Thank you for coming.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. It's really exciting being the first guest on your show, the premiere episode. I couldn't be more honored. Yeah, that's exciting.
Thank you for doing this with me. I'm so excited. So, John, today we have so many, interesting questions, and we will learn about your tips and advice on how to work internationally. So, are you ready, John?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be. So, let's
go. So let's start.
Right.
So tell me about yourself, John. Your background, how many languages?
Sure. So as you already mentioned, I'm a business English coach. I specialize with Japanese professionals, and I'm also a certified intercultural trainer. I have been teaching English for coming up to 17 years now, where I started out in Japan and taught there and lived there around in Saitama, and worked in Saitama and Tokyo for several years. Eventually came back to Canada, continued my teaching career here. And now I'm focusing on my specialty because with Japanese professionals, particularly because I have such a connection to Japan, because my time there was so meaningful to me and changed so much of my life, of the direction of my life. So, although I can't be there right now for a number of reasons, having that connection and helping Japanese professionals is a really it's really important to me. It's a very important part of my identity and who I am. So that's where I get most joy. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, so how many countries that you have lived?
Well, yeah, that's nothing compared to you, Dave. For myself, in terms of actual countries I've lived in, it's essentially just Canada and Japan, which is why it's so meaningful to me. Yeah.
So,
But,
I know that Canada is quite multicultural, background. What was your thought, before you come to Japan? Like, were you excited? You were, you really into Japan before, or tell me.
yeah, that's the interesting thing because, of course, when you hear a lot of people who go to Japan, particularly when they're younger. I wasn't that young. I was in my 30s when I first went, and I liked Japan, but I wasn't sort of one of these, I guess, otaku, like kind of anime otaku or anything like that. I didn't have like, oh yeah, I want to be just like in the anime, but I had an interest in it. I knew that it was a safe country. I knew there was a lot of opportunity there. I didn't really have. I did some reading, but I didn't really have that much of an idea of what it was really like to be there because, of course, I could only just see videos and read about it, and that's quite a bit different than actually experiencing it for yourself, of course.
Yeah. And what was your feeling just before you actually, flying to Japan? Did you have a job back then already?
I had done a number of different jobs. Interestingly enough, m- my decision to go to Japan was based on a kind of a deal I'd made with myself. I
Mm,
hadn't actually gone to school to be a teacher before. That wasn't
right.
one of my ambitions when I was younger. In fact, at the time, I was a struggling actor in Toronto.
Mm.
And I had been doing a number of jobs, basically day jobs, to try and, I think, feed my acting habit. Just trying to make a career out of it was just, it's very difficult, let's say, everywhere to be a professional actor. And I made a deal with myself. Okay, I'll see how I'm going to try this for another year. And if I can't do that, well, I know there's an opportunity to teach English in Japan. And well, okay, that can't be too hard. I mean, I'm an English speaker, so of course that's got to be easy to do. And obviously, that's not the case. I know much better now. There is quite a bit of skill and knowledge that you need to actually be a good, effective teacher. And just being a speaker of the language is not one of those skills.
Oh, but you
So,
never know, people watching this YouTube or, live streaming. Hey, would you like to be, like acting this or that?
yeah, yeah. Well, it basically was a motivator, and of course, as you can see, the acting obviously didn't work out so well, so I ended up in Japan, and that's why I'm here now. And
Awesome.
yeah,
So how long in total you lived in Japan?
that was 7 years, and in fact, it actually ended up being 7 years to the day because I arrived in well, okay, this probably reveals a bit of my age, but March 31st, 2005. And I left on March 31st, 2012 with my wife in tow, who I
Mm.
met in Japan, of course. Yeah.
Hey guys, thank you,
Hey.
Paul. Hey Scott, thank you for coming. So we were just, asking about John's background, and so let's move on to yeah. So you talked about, decided one day working internationally. In your case, in Japan, which is quite different, right, from
Yes.
Canada, your cultural background. So,
Yes.
what was the main challenge that you faced when you worked internationally?
Yeah. There were a number of challenges, but I would say the biggest challenge was the contextual communication. high context versus low context, right? The whole idea in Japan of kuki yomeru, right? Being able to read the air, to read a situation, and how that's such an ingrained part of the culture. And when you're someone who's coming from outside of that, where a low context culture being where things are kind of stated more explicitly, right? Like Canada, that was a real adjustment. It's kind of in the sense of coming in like a child in a room of adults.
What do you
Equivalent to,
mean?
well, in the,
Who is
yeah,
child?
I was the child coming
Oh,
into
you're
this
the
room of
child, and
adults in the
then
sense. Yeah, because of
ah,
course, when you think as a child, there's not, you don't necessarily pick up on the subtext that's going on
right,
between
okay,
adults and the additional meanings or something. And
right,
in the sense, I kind of felt like a child in some ways because
mm,
I wasn't able to pick up on these things. And it wasn't, and the thing was, of course, it's not that in Japan there was a an intentional way to deceive. It was just the way of communicating.
mm,
And so the idea of being able to understand specific body language or the way something was said, uh, which if you grow up in Japan, you would know,
yeah,
but I did not.
yeah,
And they didn't necessarily know that I wouldn't know that kind of thing. So there would be messages that I wouldn't pick up on and would be frustrated. There was a specific incident that I remember early on in my teaching career, which I think I posted about on LinkedIn recently, where I was teaching a student one to one in a one to one situation, and I was giving some instructions on how to prepare for answer questions on a TOEIC test. And of course, I asked the question which no knowledgeable English teacher should ask, which is, "Do you understand?"
do you understand to your students? And
And of course,
of
he
course,
said, "Yes, yes, of
I
course,"
do understand
because
everything.
yes, yes, yes. And being from a low context culture, not being an experienced teacher, I assumed that that was in fact the message. But of
Mm,
course, really, if I had known what I know now, which is to understand his body language, the way he was saying it, in fact, yes was just sort of the reflexive action, I guess, in terms of Japan, just to say yes, I'm listening to you, kind of thing, that kind of message, as opposed to yes, I understand.
yeah.
Because yeah, when he, of course, he did the exercise, he clearly didn't, and I actually got frustrated because I thought, well, why didn't he tell me
Mm,
this? And that was, of course, the wrong reaction to have. It's just, I now know, of course, to adjust. I would ask questions. Okay, so can you explain this to me, just to clarify? Because there's a number of questions, cultural questions. There's a worry about appearing foolish, being risk averse. So if I show that if I, maybe from the Japanese perspective, if I don't
mm.
show that I understand, and obviously you can explain this, you know this more than I do, yeah, being
Yeah.
Japanese.
And for
Uh,
me, Japanese point of view, when you ask me, hey, do you have questions? Well, I do, like you said, but if I say something, I might inconvenient everybody's time. I don't want to kind
yes,
of take up just for myself. And that's really the different culture, both sides. We feel
exactly.
frustrated and feel also pressured. Oh, don't ask me. Like, how about everybody?
Yeah,
From
yeah,
Japanese point of view. So that kind of
mhm,
cultural difference and mindset, yeah, if you don't know, we don't know. And yeah,
exactly.
okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. And so, yeah, based on your experience, and what are the three skills do you think people need to have when you work internationally?
Yeah, I would say one of the most important skills to have is self awareness. And that's something, when if you've only been in one culture, your home culture, that's tricky to do. It's much easier, obviously, for people who have worked abroad, such as yourself and myself. Uh, although this can also be brought through training as well, to be aware of your culture and why you do certain things. It's the whole analogy of the fish not noticing the water, right? Because it's always around them and it not realizing what water is. It's the same idea with the culture. Once you've been in a culture that you need to understand, okay, this is different. So, for example, in Canadian culture, the idea of, what we said, if you don't understand something, you say something, or another one would be eye contact. Eye contact, if you make eye contact with someone, that shows that you're honest, right? And that's just and if you grow up in that, that's kind of you thinking, okay, that's just the way it is. That's natural. That's the way humans
and you do
are.
that naturally
That's
as
what you do. And
default.
of course, doesn't everyone do that? Right. And it isn't until you
Yeah,
get out,
until
you get out to another culture and you realize, oh, okay, well, actually, in this case, it's a sign, in this culture, it's a sign of aggression. Or so not making eye contact is in fact showing respect. It's, for example, and that's just one example. And until you don't know, until you know, you don't know. So
exactly.
before, and if you don't have that self-awareness, you can't adjust to another culture, because then you're thinking, this is the universal way, this is the way things should be. So what they're doing is wrong. And then you realize, oh, no, this is just one way of doing things. This is just one way of looking at things, and this is things. And it's not that one is better than the other, or even that the way in the other culture is better. It's just that they're different but equal. I think.
And that is, basically you kind of don't realize this until you encounter, like you said, until you travel somewhere, or that's really important. And that's why I do encourage people to go abroad. As when you're young, it's really great thing if you could do this. But thank you. So self-awareness. And what's the second one?
The second one is being able to observe, and doing it in an objective way, observing what's going on around you, and of course, any interculturalists would know the DAE model, right? The describe, analyze, and evaluate. And it's easy to kind of jump towards just evaluating something. Oh, he's not looking at me in the eye. Okay, so he's dishonest. Kind of just going to that. But this way, if you observe, you can look at it objectively and just, okay, what is objectively happening? He's not looking at me in the eye. He's not looking me in the eye. So what could be, and then going on to analyze that. Okay, so what could be some reasons for that? Okay, maybe maybe there's some dishonesty, or maybe it's a question of respect, or maybe he's a little nervous. So the idea is that you want to think of multiple ideas and consider that before you jump to evaluating and saying, making a judgment and a gut reaction. And then you can, of course, realize, oh, well, this is how it makes me feel. Okay, so why do I feel that way? And thinking of it in a more reasoned way. And I think that that's essential to being able to, once you have that self-awareness, then you can observe things and not make these quick judgments about things that are done differently than the way you do them.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that part, normally when you travel different culture and when you observe, it's so important to put yourself in a neutral position, because so many times we feel, why people do that? Or, you feel frustrated because it's so different, or it's, you can't understand why they do that. And, we kind of understand now. So that was this. But when you're in that situation, you just need to manage the stress, and that's totally the skill you can acquire, isn't it?
Yes.
So observation.
Absolutely.
And what's the third one?
I'd say the third one is adaptability. And in the sense of being able to adapt to the new culture, the environment you're in, but also still being able to maintain your own sense of identity. So without completely losing that, because it seems that from my experience, what I've seen of the most successful people, they're able to, particularly with Japan, because that's where I focus on, but I'm sure this is the same everywhere. The ones who are the most successful are the ones who are able to get to that kind of, I would say, like a sweet spot where they do adapt to the culture, they adjust certain ways, but at the same time, they don't try to become completely like someone from that country. They still maintain parts of themselves as well. So yeah, because I think if you lose your sense of identity, you still need to have a sense of who you are, and that can change, of course, as you grow and adapt. But it's not that you're giving up completely where you were from the other where you grew up, because that's always going to have some influence on you, those values that you were raised with. So it's kind of that, like I said, reaching that sweet spot in between.
That's the hard part, isn't it? Like to balance. Like, I'm away from Japan for a while, and to maintain, I still behave sometimes a very Japanese way. And I try to be aware, and I need to change my way of communicating. If I'm communicating with you, John, I need to be more like westernized version of me. And when I meet someone, Japanese, I'll be trying to be super Japanese. So I love the fact that we can switch that. And that is the key when you kind of dealing with people with different cultural background. But it happens all the time, not necessarily in a different culture, but when you're dealing with people from different values, beliefs.
Yes, that's true. And it's not just national cultures as well, although that's kind of the focus that we're talking about today. But as you said, different beliefs, different corporate cultures, regional cultures as well, certainly. So it's not just about one culture, national culture. It's really important, I think.
Great. So coming to the top tip that you can give for those who communicate with clients, team globally, what would be the top tip?
Yeah, well, I think the top tip that I have ties back to all of the things that I mentioned, and that story I mentioned at the beginning as well, is to never make assumptions about really anything. You always need to check and confirm your understanding, whether it's a situation at work or do you understand these instructions that I'm giving you to follow them, for example, or the behaviors in different situations, because cultural assumptions, things will be different. So you need to just be open to that. Check what your counterparts in the situation do. Check your own understanding. Think about, am I making assumptions? And I think that that's a very important skill as well. And if you can do all of those things, that will make your time more productive, and you'll encounter less frustration, I think, in the long term.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Kenta-san. Culture is learned, so I'm feeling that being in another country can shape your new identity. Totally.
Yes, absolutely.
So from pure Canadian John to after you lived in Japan, what's the new version of John? What kind of changes you had?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel one of the things that I've definitely improved on is I'm more comfortable with silence in conversations. So I feel I'm more patient, because I'm used to dealing with a culture in Japan where silence is more common in conversations, and there's more time to think about things, and not feeling the need, for example, in a conversation to fill in that silence, because that's something that we're not, I think Canadians and probably Americans as well, we're not really comfortable with silence. It's kind of
Why
an indication.
Is that? It makes you feel nervous, or?
I think it's the idea that, there's kind of tension involved, that the reason that they're silent is because people are uncomfortable with the situation. And this is something that often gets played up. For example, if you think about a lot of situation sitcoms. This makes me think of, okay, so The Office. Obviously, we
Yeah.
all know The Office, right? And it started out as a British show, and then there was the American adaptation. And I recall a story where they were adapting one of the earlier episodes from the British version to the American one, where there was obviously a lot of uncomfortable situations. You know, that's where the humor comes from in the series. And I think that there was a where they were adapting a scene where there was much longer silence in the British version. But then the American one, I think they shortened it, or they put some narration over it, because they just thought
Okay.
it's too, like, yes, we want it long, but not that long. It's like too long for American audiences, as I recall something about that. And I think, yeah, we're used to kind of the idea of being very social, and the idea of being social is, okay, talking with each other and just having the animated conversation with lots of energy, and
Yeah.
you know, when people stop, it's like, oh, because somebody said something really bad, and like,
That's
oh,
why
oh,
I do tell my
yeah,
clients, like, it's okay when you're working with Japanese. The silence is totally fine. Don't
yeah,
worry.
yeah,
Yeah, because Japanese will be like thinking, or taking time to respond.
yeah.
So, oh, thank you, Kaori-san. You really sympathize with me saying about changing attitude depends on the country. Because yes, you're in Singapore.
Mhm.
I'm sure the people in Singapore are quite different as well.
Yeah.
And oh, thank you, Paul, for your comment. I believe that more interculturally we operate, the more we forge a new identity. Yeah, we
Yes.
always like a version up or
Yes.
diversify ourselves, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And Manabe-san, yes, it's ma. Yeah. Ne. Silence is
Mm.
gold.
Yes.
It's totally fine and virtue even rather than talking too much. So that's the hard part, that when you know different culture and how you adjust that. Like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Um
Absolutely.
yeah. Canadian born person. Mm-hmm. Result of both parents' cultural backgrounds, Irish and Hungarian, and,
Mm.
and culture grew up in multicultural Canada, and culture being influenced by in study and travel and marriage Japan. Yeah, we constantly learn, right? I also, learn Australian way. I have to be direct, and it's so painful to me, by the way, to be specific and yeah. So, yes, we all are. And that's why we want to encourage, everybody to have these global skills and cross cultural, intercultural awareness, and use this, because this can be used for anywhere in the world. And like now, we're all accessing, or we're broadcasting from Toronto and Brisbane. We need to work with people from different cultural backgrounds as default, or more than before. So we're hoping this session was helpful. And so if we want to reach you, John, just trying to wrapping up our session. Just
Yes.
wait. This is the QR. Let me just swap. Let me
Oh,
see. How
not
do I
this one.
swap this one? Let me just go back.
All right.
I can't really. So let me
We
just
have each
try
other's
it.
QR codes.
Okay.
So
it's.
is it this one? Is that mine?
Let me just. Oh, that's live. I don't.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Now.
All right. Okay.
So if
So
you wanted
this
to
is the correct one.
connect with John, and this is my QR, let me just check these banners.
All
And
right.
so, yeah, John, please, how do I reach you? I know you are offering lots of amazing services.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you can reach me, of course, on LinkedIn. That's primarily where I operate, and have a lot of my content goes up there. So you can certainly go to the QR code there, and that's the best way to reach me, is really through LinkedIn. Of course, I have an email. I can say it out, but probably can maybe find some way to include that. If you're watching this in archive, maybe on the YouTube later on. I'm not sure if that's an option there. So that's the best way to reach me. And if you're, as of course, I am a business English coach for Japanese professionals and certified intercultural trainer. I am also training as a personal and business coach. And if you, I am also open to partnering with people who want to unlock their potential when they're adapting to North American or Japanese business cultures. So, and of course, another thing I should plug, a project that I'm doing. Paul, who's been putting out a lot of these questions and statements and great ideas in the chat, is of course one of my co-hosts on the Ego Education podcast, along with Anastaya, which is of course one place where we had a conversation earlier with you, Rie-san. So yes, we're constantly putting out episodes for that, talking with many interesting people as well there.
Yeah, so tuning
Mhm.
in on John's podcast, Ego Education Podcast. And if you're interested in, John's coaching, connect with John. Thank you, Kento-san, for your comments. Yes, important in Japan, different country. International happens in a lot. Yes, so I'm sure, the tips that John shared with us today was some, useful. And the key is use it.
Yes.
We all listen, watch a lot of things, but it's so easy to forget. As soon as we finish this live, think about how you can improve your communication, right?
Exactly.
Oh, if you are online, you can see this comment on LinkedIn comments. So yeah, and if you enjoyed, if you have any comments, feedback, please let us know. If you're watching on live or archives, we will definitely read your comments. So hope this was useful. And thank you everybody, commenting and sharing, your thoughts and experiences with us. And hope to see you on the next Globalise Yourself live stream. And thank you for your time. Take care. Thank you, John, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
ありがとうございました、皆さん。
こちらこそありがとう。
See you next time. ありがとう。
ありがとう。バイバイ。